Hey gamers, Aksu here. This is a follow-up to my supersized, tax-free base layout video. Be sure to check that one out first. Here's a link at the top of the page. In this video, I detail how to build that bottom floor that I previewed so that the final base fully utilizes all 7 3/4 vertical tiles within the land claim, the maximal design. Let's get started. For this guide, I've chosen a build location that will help to clearly illustrate the critical build requirements, which I will highlight. And because when construction is complete, we'll be able to easily see the full volume that's utilized in the final build. I normally would not build in this location. Instead, I would absolutely want to configure my base to allow for a drive-in garage for ground-based vehicles. This build does start the same as in my previous video. We start with a square foundation that's placed to allow triangle floor pieces to extend towards the land claim boundaries. And then when placed correctly, you'll be able to add vertical walls just within the boundary. This tile should simultaneously anchor the complete floor plan within the center of the land claim, as well as establish the exact height that the bottom floor will be placed at. Here I'm trying to place a foundation equidistant from 2 boundary walls. To give me a better chance, as well as more consistency, I'm lining up the corners of the foundation using the vertical corner of the land claim as a guide. I try to keep this alignment as I pull the foundation towards me and away from the boundary for final placement. In this example, you can see that the floor tiles are just at the boundary and the walls don't fit. This is a good start though, because now we know we need to shift that foundation just a little bit in from each boundary wall. Unfortunately, it's very difficult to do because of camera changes with perspective or zooming in and zooming out, as well as the placement distance from you being hard to gauge on the preview. To assist with this problem, you can see I've placed a chair to make a reference point. I've located the chair at the corner of the foundation, spaced about the distance that I think the foundation needs to move. As with the previous video, you can see right now that I'm verifying the floor plan is properly centered by verifying that I can build external walls on all 4 sides. It's here that I realized that while I was providing guidance for pulling that first foundation in away from the boundaries, I forgot to adjust the vertical height of the foundation to establish the height that the bottom floor will be placed at. Because of this, I'm now checking to see how much I need to move the foundations down, and I did get lucky. It turns out that half of a vertical unit works out pretty well. If it would have been any other height, I probably would have had to start over. This next part is really important. The height where you place the top of this foundation, which will become the height where your bottom floor is placed, must provide exposed ground terrain at these vertices. This is where we're going to place columns, and they must touch the ground terrain. And you can see that both columns I'm placing do in fact touch rock. This is an absolute requirement, and it will become a large factor in choosing the location where you apply this design. I discussed that I made a mistake here. Normally, when placing that first foundation, I should have scrolled that foundation down just enough to expose the ground terrain just above the floor surface. So when you're doing that initial setup, when you're placing the tiles to verify that the external walls can be built on all 4 sides, you should also be checking that there is in fact ground terrain above the floor level at these critical vertices. The reason this is so important is that these 2 columns alone will provide support for the entire structure. And an even better location would allow for 3 or 4 of the corners to be grounded. The more grounded points you have, the less fragile the base will be. Once you begin placing final building tiles, it's a good idea to power up your base shields so that your structure won't take damage in case of a sandstorm during construction. At least you'll be protected if you're within Haga Basin. You can see that I'm deleting the grounded foundations, and now the only thing holding the triangle floor and the outer wall is the column. I do find it curious, and I was surprised to see that the column only seems to provide support in one direction. We can see that at both ends, when I destroy the foundations, only one direction is maintained while the other crumbled. Because of this, when the floor is complete, I would guess that stability is actually being provided from a single root triangle that's attached to the column. However, this is just a guess on my part, as I'm trying to understand why all of the triangle and wall sets were not maintained. It's that time, guys. Please help support the channel by subscribing. You can also leave a like or comment, which really does help with the algorithm. And if you happen to be interested in live gameplay, I do stream weekly on Twitch, and I really do appreciate your support. Thank you so much, guys. Once the floor plan is centered properly, The next step is to rebuild the land claim at the correct height. This is the magic now that will finalize your land claim. To do this, we need to move the claim up more than 3 units, so that the lower boundary is positioned just to allow the floor tile to be within the boundary at the bottom. Because the floor plan is symmetrical, we know that the center point of the design is at the vertice that's shared by the 4 center tiles. We need to place the Sub-fief console exactly at this location at the right height. And as we've discussed, because of camera angles and perspective, it's very hard to place build items precisely, even if you know the exact target location. You can even give this a try yourself. Place the console exactly where you think the 4 foundations meet, and it may look correct at first until you move around and inspect the placement from all angles. Here I've only elevated 2 foundations, so I'm trying to place the console at the shared corner, and it is difficult. And this is actually why I didn't build up all 4 center foundations and try to locate it at the center. Instead, I only built up 2, and this will allow me to gauge the distance that I'm placing the console better by gaining the new information of when the Sub-fief console falls off of the structure. I then slowly pull the console back onto the structure, plus a little bit more, until I think half of the base is on the foundations. While I'm pulling the console on the foundation, I can also keep it lined up along the center line between the 2 foundations. Centering that console may take a few tries. However, you'll know you have the right location when you can verify that all of the outer walls are correctly within the land claim. Those clips were for me to show you the process I use for locating the Sub-fief console at the center of the floor plan. If I just place the land claim right there, it's actually still too low. To achieve the perfect height, after pulling the console to the correct center location, before placing it, hold Control and scroll the console height up 8 ticks and then place it. Now we should be at the correct height. Let's make sure it's right. Verify that outer walls on all 4 sides are within the boundary. Verify that the lower floor is above the bottom boundary. A good way to verify this is if you're able to build an adjacent wall or floor tile without an error message to build within your land claim. Now we do a test build up, and you should be able to build 7 full units, a half wall, and a railing. This will give you 7 3/4 vertical units tall. If you're able to fit all of these tiles, it's time to rejoice, you've done it. Now you can simply replace your temporary foundations with floor tiles. Big warning here, while recording this, I actually forgot to move my Sub-fief console down from those foundations, so when I destroyed them, it removed my land claim. However, you can avoid this mistake. Be sure to relocate your Sub-fief console with move off of the foundations before you destroy them. If you do make this mistake, you're just going to need to rebuild the center foundations and then rebuild the console again to reestablish your land claim. And then of course verify that the outer walls, the bottom floor, as well as that top railing all remain within the land claim. When I want to verify that those boundary tiles are all within the land claim, the best confirmation for me is always checking that I'm able to build an adjacent tile right on that boundary. Alternatively, you can use your construction tool using the repair option to interrogate the boundary pieces. If any tile has any part located outside of your land claim, you will receive a warning that you first need to build a claim before you can repair that tile. Another warning here, if you leave some of those temporary foundation tiles and don't replace them with floor tiles, those foundations are outside of your land claim and they will deteriorate over time with sandstorms. And a final check worth doing is the columns. Because they're so important and support the entire structure, it's especially a good idea to use the repair option to verify the bottom columns are indeed within your land claim. Once you have this layout and everything is within your land claim, the rest is simply building up and filling out the base. If you ever need to make modifications near those columns, be extra careful to avoid demolishing them on accident. The result could be catastrophic. If you're having trouble finding a compatible build location, there is an alternative for support stability. This alternative is pretty tricky though. When doing the final placement of your Sub-fief console, instead of being exactly at the center of the floor plan, you're going to want to bias it just enough so that one side or one corner of the land claim is at the extreme location where the outer wall is just inside the claim. When done correctly, this bias will move all of the wiggle room you have to the other side of the land claim. where it will be just enough room to place columns along the outer walls. If you removed all the wiggle room at a corner, then the two opposite sides should have all the wiggle room, and you can place columns on both of those sides. And then these columns placed at the outer walls provide an alternative to bring stability into your base design. And if you do like these outer wall columns instead, it is worth noting that there's not enough room in the land claim to have these columns on all four sides. And finally, if you're still having problems building at the location that you want to, you could still decide to add additional pillars or columns anywhere across the floor plan to simplify or provide additional support. Just for safety, I like the final location of my Sub-fief console to be placed on ground terrain. After building out the full design, I take a quick tour of the outside where we can easily see how much of the volume we've actually utilized. I do think that this layout is a pretty efficient use of the entire Sub-fief volume. Hopefully you found this guide to be helpful. Thank you so much for your support. Until next time.